Yep.
So good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm speaking to you from windy Calgary, Alberta, which is currently experiencing some notoriously bad extreme weather. We've got the atmospheric river that's come over British Columbia over the past 3 days and dumped about 200 millimeters of rain over 24 hours and caused massive mudslides, and flooding has evacuated several towns on the West Coast. So we are a timely presentation and a timely program right now just to talk about the increased regularity of extreme weather and what it does to our infrastructure and how we can cope with faster recovery and building with resiliency in the future. So on that cheerful note, welcome, and Decentralized Energy Canada is happy to be hosting this Global Matchmaker series with the Caribbean. And next slide, please. So a little bit about Decentralized Energy Canada. We are Canada's only industry association dedicated to decentralized energy. I can't see my vision. We connect businesses. Like, we've been around for 20 years and we've become experts at connecting businesses and identifying opportunities for accelerating global transition to a sustainable energy future. Project hoppers, project deal flow, project matchmaking, investor matchmaking, getting the right strategic partners to a project is what we're really very good at. And if we could just go back, thank you. And our core activities, aside from the project matchmaking, is we help write or create and develop educational curriculum for universities. This project is helping with microgrid project development. We do this throughout Canada as well. And we've been embarked on the standards space now, regulation and standards. So we have a very large and complicated program being delivered over the next year to help create national standards of Canada for the decentralized energy industry. So lots of interesting things. Our vision and our mission is over on the right-hand side. And next slide, please. So in the project matchmaking side of things, we started out with a program in Nigeria and working with Global Affairs Canada and our partner, the Rocky Mountain Institute, to help us meet the right partners in Nigeria, and ran a webinar on microgrid showcase projects and a business-to-business matchmaking, which was extremely successful, so successful that we had to divide the microgrid case study project elements from the investor and insurance side of things. So this time with the Caribbean, we have 2 webinars. This one today is on microgrid case studies, and the tomorrow's webinar is on innovative financing, access to capital, and reinsuring energy infrastructure assets. So with the next slide, and the program with Global Affairs Canada and the Rocky Mountain Institute, Decentralized Energy Canada is able to introduce Canadian microgrid developers with Caribbean microgrid project developers or financiers, communities. It's very relevant, Canada and the Caribbean. As I said, we're experiencing extreme weather here in Western Canada right now. It's going to require some rebuilding of energy infrastructure, and all of us are looking to microgrids as the resilient solution for faster recovery and less damage and mitigating cost damages due to extreme weather. So today we'll talk about the microgrid projects, and then tomorrow we will look at financial support mechanisms and methods for making insurance affordable. And we'll hear from some very interesting people about how the cost of insurance is really impacting business. Next slide. So this is just our quick agenda. You'll be hearing from Global Affairs Canada, the Rocky Mountain Institute, RWI Synthetics, Compass Solar International, Modern Huts, D-Hybrid Power Systems, and Iguana Technologies, a very diverse range of presentations covering all aspects of microgrid development, whether it's international partnership development, island resiliency programs that can help, and some off-grid microgrid success stories. And we'll be finishing with a talk about some virtual power plant successes that come from Iguana Technologies that has just had some very exciting global news. And next slide. I just wanted to very quickly give the Cole's notes of the definitions for the terminology we're using. Smart grids, the definition of smart grids is more of that larger infrastructure, and the idea behind smart grids is you've got digital technologies and automation to communicate between different parts of the larger grid, automated demand management, protecting the network and saving energy. Microgrids is more of it's got a defined boundary, like a community, a hospital. You try and keep it to a community or a hospital or campus, but it's interconnected, can be connected to the larger distribution grid, or can be off grid. When you get to mini grids and nanogrids, these are off grid systems. So either within a community off grid or within a building. Okay, next slide. And I just want to thank very much Global Affairs Canada and the Trade Commissioner Service of Canada and the Rocky Mountain Institute for helping us find partners in the Caribbean, for helping us connect our Canadian network to this network. And with that, I will promptly hand it over to Juan Pablo from Trade Commissioner Canada.
Thank you, Anouk, and thank you everyone for joining this session. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Okay, great. So as Anouk was saying, the Trade Commissioner Service is also a partner in this initiative. And I want to make a very short presentation about who we are, what we do, and how we can support both companies in Canada, but also contacts in the Caribbean, as I know there are representatives from both sides in this session. So next slide, please. In a nutshell, and I wanted to provide some numbers and some insights into the network that the Trade Commissioner Service has. And like the very short summary of what we do is we support Canadian companies go abroad and connect with the local contacts, but we also help local contacts find the relevant expertise and the relevant solutions from Canada. So here are some figures of what we've done in the last 125 years of existence from Trade Commissioner Service. We work with more than 10,000 Canadian companies per year. We are a network that are present in more than 160 cities worldwide. In the region, in the Caribbean, we're present in 6 offices. And we are a network of more than 1,000 trade commissioners around the world. And again, we're a little bit few in the region. And we have also Canadian offices so that we can connect you with the right partners in Canada or from Canada to the global network. Next slide, please. These are some of the things that we do. The key part of our job is, as I said, to connect, leveraging our network, and providing also kind of the trends and what is relevant for both sides to be connected. We provide some funding. Part of the funding, the first part of the funding that you can see under CanExport is only for Canadian companies. We also have some small pockets that we provide for international contacts for technical assistance. And we also have some very interesting programs around the world on technology acceleration. We call it the Canadian Technology Accelerators, and they're present in around 10 cities around the world. We also, of course, prepare and organize trade missions and events. Some of you might have already participated in one of them, or you might have heard of them happening in the region. So that is kind of in a nutshell what we do. We are very happy to be part of this session, and also to stay connected with all the attendees to this session to keep working together in the future. Next slide, please. Just to wrap up, because I don't want to take more time from all the content that we have lined up for today. I wanted to leave you with this slide, which is kind of the coordinates where you can find us. I would suggest that all contacts in the Caribbean reach out to me directly. That's the first email that you will see in the table in the left, because it would be kind of the easiest way to get the information that you need. And for Canadian organizations, I would direct you to the regional offices, which again, they're the first contact point where you can find all the information that you require. We're also present in social media, and you can also visit our website. So I would encourage you to do so. And please don't hesitate to reach out or to let us know your questions throughout the session through the Q&A box or the chat. I'd be happy to support in any way I can. Thank you, Anouk, for the possibility, and I wish everyone a very fruitful conversation and session today.
Thank you, Juan Pablo. That was fantastic. And just remember, if you're a Canadian company or a Caribbean company, reach out to Juan Pablo, and they're extremely efficient and reliable at helping you navigate the whole system. So David Gums, over to you. You did the same thing as I did on the slide. Great mind.
Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm just going to share with you briefly a little bit about RMI. I'm not going to spend a lot of times on the individual slides because I just want to get the introductions across. We'll have much more opportunity to go in depth in some of the projects and activities later on. Next slide, please. So RMI is an independent nonprofit organization founded in 1982. So we've been around for quite some time. We have transitioned the way we do things, and the Islands program is one of the newer programs relatively. It's been around for about 7 years now. And the whole concept of RMI in the islands and elsewhere is to transform global energy to a clean, prosperous, secure, low carbon future. So we basically want to transition to renewable energy and including not only the energy sources, but in terms of energy use. To do this, we have a different way of doing things. We engage deeply with businesses and communities, and we also engage with governments and utilities. And our idea is that if we can bring all of the key stakeholders together, we will make more progress. Sometimes that's in small steps, and sometimes it's in bigger steps. We utilize a wide range of skills in terms of the personnel that we have on board. We have from project managers to communications report writers and folks who primarily focus on, think tank type activities. But as you'll see in the Islands program, which I'll share a little bit about later, we get very deeply involved in projects. So with that said, our program has a very high focus on creating jobs, attracting investment to the islands, and providing proven, trusted, open-minded partnerships. So we're pretty transparent in the way we operate. And the whole idea is that we can bring more people to the table, gain trust, we will get more progress. And essentially, the outcomes are more impactful because they're considering a sort of broad, open, and transparent approach. Next slide, please. With that said, you'll see in the past 5 years, and sort of focus of what we're talking about here today is the impact that climate change has had on the Caribbean region and the Atlantic Basin in particular. So this has a significant impact on the economies of the Caribbean region. And that's being said, economies are set back for 5 to 10 years by one Category 5 storm. So our work matters. And what we do essentially is to try and make more resilient electricity systems. That includes the introduction and execution of microgrid concepts in the region. Next slide, please. Our approach is pretty sort of textbook in terms of how we approach it. We do the planning, where we do integrated resource plans for islands and countries. And then we basically do the project development. But along the way, we also do capacity building. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the new programs that we're launching that we've launched in 2021. Next slide, please. So one of the programs that we have launched, and I guess the header is missing here, but this is our Energy Transition Academy. And that program is essentially to help us build capacity in the region. We've realized over the years that, yes, we work through a process to get to a successful project implementation and commissioning, but we want to use some of the same steps and concepts that we've used along the way to make that project successful, to build capacity in the region so that we can build momentum. And that is through our Energy Transition Academy. Essentially, what we look to is to break down the barriers of change. And you know, when we drive and build more leadership, I think we will sort of get the momentum we need to get the transition happening in the region much faster. Next slide, please. Another program that we've launched is called CFAN, the Climate Finance Access Network. And essentially, again, as we're doing our work in the region and throughout the Global South, we realize that access to finance is one of the biggest challenges and barriers to success. And although much more finance or monies have been sort of put or has been allocated to climate change and adaptation for the Caribbean region in general, access to those funds is very difficult and challenging. And in response to that, we've created this new program, which essentially will put support directly in the islands, where we will train up and develop folks to basically access and target these funds across the various institutions globally. Next slide, please. So on the ground, we focus on developing and designing grid architecture, designing construction of renewable energy installations, and the physical planning. You know, we use a very practical approach to doing things. So things outside of the, you know, that may supplement or complement the renewable energy initiatives that we're doing, we'll actually work on those. And some of those things may be consideration of on the grounding of utilities grid, because it makes it more resilient and more adaptable to climate change. Next slide, please. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through each of these categories, but essentially what we do is basically focus on critical infrastructure. And I'll show you some of the projects that we've been working on in that regard. But we're looking at critical infrastructure in terms of utilities, health, security, transportation, education, and the economic backbone of the countries. And I'll go to the next slide, which will share an example as to, oh, I'm sorry. First, let me talk about the benefits. Of course, it brings grid resiliency. It improves lives at the end of the day. And you can see the various activities that fall within there. And it saves money. So we can look at things like offset and spin and reserve, and segmentation of the grid, and making the grid more resilient and effective. And of course, at the end of the day, all of this results in a cleaner environment that impacts us all. Next slide, please. So the Bahamas is a good example of the work we do. I know Chris is going to be talking a little bit about the different projects, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. If we can go to the next slide, we'll show specifically how some of our work is designed in the Bahamas. So Abaco was hit by Hurricane Dorian back in 19. And of course, we all saw a lot of the images that came out of that. Well, one of the other things that may not have gotten as much attention is access to electricity, which took quite some time. In some cases, parts of the Bahamas took over a year to recover electricity access. So we're looking at something in particularly Abaco, which was heavily hit, and segmenting that grid into various microgrids. And the various designs that complement some of the needs in those specific parts of the island. But if you look on the north and the south, number 1 and number 5, essentially those areas were lesser hit areas during Hurricane Dorian that passed over the center of the island. Well, if we have a microgrid in the north and a microgrid in the south, those areas electricity could be returned to those critical facilities and the neighborhoods and the neighboring areas that enables us to transmit energy. So next slide, please. Another example would be in the British Virgin Islands, who were hit by Hurricane Irma. Again, creating microgrids that segment the grid and be able to provide energy to critical facilities like the water treatment plant, and the community college, which also acts as a shelter, is a great example of that in some of the work that we do. And next slide. So we understand the impact and the importance of microgrids. We're developing the grids of the future in the region, and we're looking to basically make them more resilient to last for the next 10 to 20, 25 years in terms of infrastructure improvements. By accessing a more viable generation options, we determine the least cost approach, and that helps us to save money at the end of the day, which is everyone's concern. But of course, this has a great impact on the environment and health, and help us to command the stage and lead the way in terms of the renewable energy transition across the globe. So with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll leave it here so that we can continue with the workshop.
Excellent. And yes, I should have said that at the beginning. We're going to keep questions till we'll address the questions at the end. And if you can use the chat box or the Q&A to put your questions. So that's great. Thank you so much, David. That's a massive tool mechanism for de-risking projects in the Caribbean. So thank you very much for that. And Chris is going to talk to us about some project opportunities and how we become part of potentially a procurement process.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. How's my audio coming through?
Very good.
All right, great. Pleasure to be here. David Gumbs gave you a great overview of RMI. So what I'm going to do is tell you more about RMI. Not to belabor, but to just give you a different perspective on what we do in the region and how we help bring projects to market, and really how we're trying to work ourselves out of this job. We really don't want to be in a position of a gatekeeper to markets. We want it to be free and open, like anything else, like air conditioning systems or any building materials or those type of things. We would like the market to be that open, but it's just not ready yet. So there's a lot of market barriers in many of these jurisdictions that we help to overcome. Next slide, please. So we work in 15 Caribbean countries. We have done work in each one of these, although we are focused more at the moment in Bermuda, Bahamas, USVI, BVI, as well as St. Vincent and soon to be St. Lucia. But we have done work in each one of these jurisdictions highlighted on the screen, and hope to be as helpful as we need to be to open up markets for renewable energy, microgrids, distributed energy resources, and battery technologies as required. Next slide, please. So David went over this. I'll just highlight that I'm the director of projects. I lead the central pillar there, which is really about project de-risking, project identification, project development, and really putting an open procurement process out for many of our government and utility clients. Next slide. We've had some success in a bunch of jurisdictions that haven't had success with renewable energy, and I think that just speaks to the fact that our donors and sponsors have been really generous to allow us to utilize some really hard to find funding to bring projects to market. I would say 99% of the projects that we do are philanthropically sponsored from the development and procurement standpoint, but then all the CapEx is generally utility bank financing, utility balance sheet financing, bank financing, or government financing. There are some grants that have come from outside entities. United Arab Emirates has been really generous in the region, as well as the 5 Cs and a few other international organizations. You'll see that this list, we cover a wide geography there. Many of these projects listed are the very first projects in these jurisdictions, which developers listening in know how hard it is to work in a jurisdiction for the first time without any regulatory precedents. That's one of our main goals, is to do world-class projects. That way we set really good precedents and allow that market to develop on the heels of that project. The St. Lucia utility scale solar PV was the very first project we did on the RMI banner. We did that in partnership with the government of St. Lucia and Lucelec, the monopoly utility. And I will say that the runner-up to that project was a Canadian company. Ultimately, the EPC went to a Spanish company who had a lot of, I think they had a lot of projects in Dominican Republic as well as Puerto Rico, and they had recently done a Barbados project, so they really knew the Eastern Caribbean really well. But there's been a lot of parity between the contractors that come in. U.S., local, Canadian, German, Spanish. So I would say the market's pretty wide open. Next slide, please. The first projects and jurisdictions are tough, and wouldn't recommend it unless you did have a philanthropic sponsor, because there's just so many omissions to everything, customs, permitting, interconnection, work permits, all these type of things. Because you got to remember, these utilities have been working in a centralized, diesel dominant infrastructure, since electricity came to the islands 50, 60 years ago. They've really had one modality of operation. So we have to deconstruct that a bit and build a new paradigm. And that takes time and talent, resource, and of course, money that many foreign investors just wouldn't have the soft cost to do so. And even if they did, that would drive up the levelized cost of energy, and the PPA costs so high that it wouldn't be able to compete with diesel. So that's the reason for our existence. Anyway, next slide. One thing David didn't mention is we do a lot of thought leadership in the region as well. We've been featured on 60 Minutes, CBS News. We've got some of our staff members that have been on TEDx. We've done a lot of profiles from renewable energy microgrids from around the globe, including the region. And we did a series on solar resilience after Hurricanes Maria, Irma, and Dorian. So I encourage you to take a look at our thought leadership through our website. Next slide. All right, so you guys are all here about steel in the ground. So what I'm going to do is show you just kind of a macro view of where projects are, where they've been, and some of the generalized opportunities that we see on the horizon. It's really important that at least one of our pillars focuses on steel in the ground, because until a jurisdiction has these assets operating, it's all concept, right? They don't have it in their grounded context. They don't have it within their regulations on their shores. So, borrowing from Hawaii or, rural parts of Canada are not ideal for the Caribbean, even though microgrids and solar and battery have been very successful in the jurisdictions just mentioned. So once we do a project, it's very important that we help the regulatory environment environment, help the political, economic environment expand, right, and set that precedence. All right, next slide. All right, so I'll just do some level setting around the markets. So the markets loosely are set by the IRPs or the IRRPs, which is the Integrated Resilient Resource Plans. When we first started doing them in the region, we called them NETs, National Energy Transition Strategies. And what that does is allow the government, the regulator, if they have one, and the utility set some milestones and some goals toward the INDCs, usually base set on levelized cost of energy, resiliency, jobs, sustainability, those type of things. In all those jurisdictions listed on the screen, they all have milestones set for specific technologies like solar, either distributed or utility scale, or wind. Some even have some ocean technologies in there as well, in waste energy. What we have seen move forward more than anything else has been solar, either distributed solar or utility scale solar. So if you want to look to see where the market potential is in a certain jurisdiction, take a look at their IRRP, and that'll give you a good indication of where, at least where they want to go. And generally, the government and the utility have agreed on the low-hanging fruit, the initial cohort there. Next slide. Now the region is really contemplating a lot of new business models. As we said before, it's dominated by a diesel-centric system, but that's being challenged, economically by cheaper technologies, as well as from an environmental standpoint, not just so much from a global climate change, but really from on the shores being resilient to hurricanes and sea level rise. We're seeing a lot of distributed energy projects, at least on the drawing board, if not implemented yet. Some of the things that have already been put in place are EV charging infrastructure, EV bus fleets, looking at Bermuda and Jamaica and Barbados. We're looking at some EV leasing models, which is kind of interesting, especially if a utility was to do that. Battery storage as a service, microgrids of critical facilities that David did a great job outlining. Energy as service, that's definitely something that's taken off here in the States, particularly with government clients, can that transfer to the region? And then virtual power plants, where I think most of the micro developers on this particular webinar, have their sites. Next slide, please. So I think, I don't need to explain what a VPP is to most of you, right? It's just the ability for the utility to dispatch capacity and energy from customers or locations outside their immediate utility fence line. And that's really where we're trying to get these utilities to go. That way, microgrid developers, critical facilities, campuses, resorts, can participate in that market. And it doesn't just have to be a monopoly-driven, fuel-driven exercise. And we're tiptoeing into that through the critical facilities, as David had mentioned. All right, let's get to the market. Next slide. Yeah, David covered this. We can skip it. All right, so the pipeline is there. A lot of the opportunities are not quite mature, but when they do mature, you will see them on our website. And I believe I have the URL at the bottom of the screen, which you can't see, but I'll make sure we get that out to you guys. As far as large-scale renewable energy projects go, there will be a Bermuda aggregated solar project upwards of about 7 megawatts, hopefully by the end of the year, but most definitely by the first month or two in 2022. That will be an open international tender, but obviously a lot of Bermudian content services will be preferred. The Bahamas are working on a multiple island aggregated renewable energy project as well with the Inter-American Development Bank. That was slated to go out early in 22. You will see that on our website as soon as the qualification stage is ready. There is a new government there, so we're not sure what their priorities are yet, but it's really a very least cost practical step for that utility in those 21 islands. So look out for that on the horizon. St. Vincent, St. Lucia have done their large scale renewable energy projects to date. Guyana, there'll be a big one coming, upwards of 30 megawatts there. That is also through the Inter-American Development Bank. We are working with the utility to de-risk and prepare that project. It'll be, I think, 5 locations, aggregated up to about 30 megawatts. There will be battery components as well. Barbados, has a quote unquote open market now for solar energy capacity, through the regulator. Jamaica just opened up their market as well for renewables. And excuse me, in terms of battery projects, St. Vincent will have a 5 megawatt project, I believe in the early part of 2022. That will be at their power station help spinning reserve. St. Lucia is looking at a similar project as well, hopefully in 22. The Bahamas has awarded their big battery project quite recently. Bermuda has their big battery project awarded as well. I already mentioned Guyana. They will have battery associated with the big 30 megawatt aggregated solar project. Jamaica has a big battery online, but I believe looking for more in the future. And in terms of the microgrid projects, we're actively developing the ones on USVI. There'll be one on St. Croix as well as St. John. Montserrat just commissioned theirs. Turks and Caicos will have a 1 megawatt project in the ground in 22, and we are developing another microgrid project for them on North Caicos with battery support. Barbuda is being built now and be commissioned at the end of this year or first couple months of 22. And then the Abaco project will be put out for qualifications hopefully by the first quarter of 22. That will be about 3 megawatts of solar PV and about 5 megawatt hours of battery for Abaco in 2 different locations. Puerto Rico, you will see opportunities on our website. They come in bunches as critical facilities are de-risked and put into an aggregated pipeline. Most of these are small medical clinics in the rural parts of Puerto Rico. They're small, 20 to 40 kW, but we try to get a dozen of them together at once to help with the procurement scale. And then last but not least, the one that David had a nice overhead of at Paraquita Bay and BVI, that opportunity will actually be up on our website this week for qualifications for engineering, procurement, and construction contractors. And the good news about that for Canada is you are a member of the Caribbean Development Bank, so any Canadian firm is qualified in terms of being from that country, whereas U.S. firms are not. So that is it. I do have a URL at the bottom of this slide, but we can make sure all the participants get that.
Yeah, we'll make sure that people receive that after. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris. There's so much opportunity, and like David talking about the capacity building and you talking about the procurement process, this is extremely helpful. And now when you get to a project where, these sorts of sessions are good for soft introduction, soft networking, get to know other people. But Myrna's going to present now on how can you further de-risk your project through artificial intelligence and some really cool innovations. So with that, Myrna, over to you.
Hi, thanks. Really enjoyed learning more about RMI and your projects, David and Chris. I had the opportunity to work a little bit through RMI and New Energy Events and the Environmental Defense Fund and a whole host of others. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But my name is Myrna Binner, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Run With It Synthetics. And we are just entering kind of into the island context and came through in a rather interesting way. And I'll start, if you want to go to the next slide, with a little bit about what we're doing and why we're a part of this conversation. So my company started 8 years ago now, and we use artificial intelligence, but we really don't consider ourselves an AI company, because really what we do is trying to use any method possible, and AI seems to be an accelerant in what we do, to build synthetic models around very complex systems. And a lot of these end up being actual geospatial regions and cities and their citizens, and facing unprecedented circumstances. And we found that these environments, and being able to model and look at cascading effects and impacts and human impacts included, gives us a real opportunity to provide that missing data in a very compelling way about the future. And so part of our context and why I think I was invited to be a part of this conversation today is that, of course, the islands are facing very unprecedented futures, and a lot of our work in resilience is designed to kind of approach that. We have some fundamental background in energy transition and understanding the underlying role that energy plays and the impacts of when it's not available. And all of these things kind of came together as I was put forward into a group called the Island Resilience Action Challenge last year. And this group was really about 100 leaders that have gotten together and really identified a problem statement, a whole host of ministries across the Caribbean, and as well as some players from the investment side and energy side, including the Rocky Mountain Institute. And it was really to look at and determine solutions that could help islands work together and provide an infrastructure for investment into these solutions that made sense for very particular needs and very particular islands. And so as a result of this action challenge, we recently presented the scorecard that we supplied for the islands at COP26, and the reception was fantastic. The receptions with the islands for this scorecard that was developed was beyond kind of the expectations. So we had 5 different islands sign on within the 12 months. Our goal was 1. And they really found that it was a place where they could express their diverse needs and goals and plans, and where they were in those plans and what they needed in a very customizable way. And that this gave them a language to be able to express their needs in decentralized energy and resilient energy planning for their islands to the investment community. And as well as a way of really kind of being transparent with themselves about what their needs were. And if you go to the next slide, I'll show you a little bit about what we do. So our participation in this was as a member to support that initiative. Our ongoing participation is to really bring what we do in terms of creating these laboratories to that effort and that initiative, and help compel an understanding of just really the importance of these mechanisms around decentralized energy and resilient societies as well, and critical infrastructure, by creating these living labs and of areas where we can not only replicate their cities and their regions and their food security and their critical infrastructure, but we can change things and really begin to understand the impact of investment that hasn't happened yet, or infrastructure that hasn't been built yet, or even climate events that haven't happened yet. So it really gives people a data-based future perspective. Next slide, please. And one of the ways we do this is quite unique, is to create synthetic populations. So this was an example of some of the modeling that we started with Dominica, and being able to create a synthetic population that's very accurate, but not based on surveillance data and never identified. So it is a way of creating a living lab for an environment, for them to experiment and explore without exposing or violating any privacy regulations. And it allows them to really see and understand marginalized populations, vulnerable populations, where they are, and really begin to ensure equity in a lot of these sustainability projects, especially those to do with energy equity. Next slide, please. And so really what we are interested in is kind of bringing that demand or event side to the planning of sustainable energy and decentralized energy supply. And we do this by connecting that energy and the impact that that energy can make on reliability or on economics and industry and supply chain, grid design, during any kind of disruptive events. You know, the islands are susceptible to the same thing as the rest of us. So solar weather that may disrupt energy grids, or supply chain issues, you know, from other events as well. And we can map all of those and map the impact so that people can really understand the opportunity of these mitigations and the importance of them. Next slide, please. And so I think the impact calculations, like I've been saying throughout, are what is really important, and being able to visualize and play forward the impact of these extraordinary investments that are being made to help people not only understand, you know, why there is this process and this imperative in this plan today, but also to help compel investment in the future and make sure that that follow through is there on all sides, and also be able to demonstrate if it's not, you know, so what the difference is, you know, if these projects get hung up in financing stages and are unable to fulfill just what that gap means to that particular island population. Next slide, please. And in the process, we get to put forward a ton of information. I think information around not only what the impact of these particular, you know, energy supply and uninterrupted energy supply can mean to islands, but also if that energy supply is interrupted for whatever reason, even if it's intermittent, you know, just where and how much is on the table in terms of being able to solve and prepare for, because through a synthetic population, we can truly kind of gain and understand access into any of their needs and responses, or what makes them vulnerable, and design response mechanisms as well, and really kind of look at the critical infrastructure interdependency. So making sure that, you know, as I saw in Rocky Mountain Institute, that, you know, that the power supply that's islanded, that can also, you know, function to keep the muster center, which is a community college, you know, up and going, and as well as, you know, kind of ensure that there is a critical water and waste access, as well as food supply available. Next slide, please. And I think this is where one of the interesting parts for us always comes to, is when we begin to experiment in these environments. So it's much funner to experiment in silico than it is waiting for real life experiments. And in these environments, we get to inflect, and we can do so really boldly with policymakers, so they can try very interesting or innovative alternatives of technologies that may not even exist or are only anticipated at this point in time, and under any circumstances. So they can really begin to play forward what some of those maybe leapfrog advances in technology or in policy or in combinations thereof might look like for their population, and not just be satisfied with incremental improvements. And I think that's some of the work that we have done in decarbonization and in energy grid resilience in larger centers. That is usually one of the results, is really understanding, especially from a human impact side, the differences or combinations that can make really big, significant differences, sometimes without a lot of spend, which also helps make more efficient investments more impactful. Next slide, please. And again, these are just some of the examples. I think, am I over time, Anouk?
Are you close to a couple slides?
Yeah, I'm almost, I think this second last slide.
Okay.
But we've done some really interesting work in larger centers where we have been able to turn the power off in silico and be able to really measure and understand different inflections in those environments for utility companies, and what that means, especially around energy, and even relating it to long-term, trust, engagement, willingness to pay, backup and auxiliary power, and its meaning for industry, and really understand what the impact is for their population. Next slide, please. And that's it for me. So we're really thrilled to be involved with the Island Resilience Action Challenge, and to be considered as a part of that group who did just amazing work, and I think was really compelling at COP in how we need to participate as the world group to bringing those imperatives forward about how we can match financing with actual individual and specific and measurable need.
Excellent.
Thank
you so much, Marinette, and congratulations to you and your team on a number of innovation awards you've received recently, and I think there's more to come. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And now we're going to take a deeper dive into microgrid case study at Chub Cay hurricane. It's a hurricane-resistant microgrid. So Justin, over to you to talk about this.
Yeah, first off, thank you very much, Anouk and Amira. That was an incredible presentation that you just put through, and some very interesting and thought-provoking concepts that you brought up. So I guess quick introduction. My name is Justin Cunningham. Been with the Compass Group as a whole for about 15 years now. We were incorporated in 2005. Specifically for this presentation, we're discussing Compass Solar and the recently completed microgrid project in Chub Cay in the Berry Islands in the Bahamas. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Justin, not sure what's going on there with that slide. Oh, there we go.
It's got a couple extra steps. So just a short intro, who we are. Compass started off in the traditional energy space as an EPC contractors. I think the two gentlemen from RMI, indicated before that traditionally power in the Caribbean has been largely diesel based, and we sought to try and elevate that product and that offering from a contractor perspective to our clients in the Bahamas. With the legislation and with the policy changes that we've experienced in the Caribbean as a whole over the last 5 years, we've transitioned a large part of our focus in order to make sure we really help our clients understand the benefit of switching to a renewable energy system, switching to a battery-based system. We've discussed the benefits of the spinning reserve capacity. A lot of our islands are actually very small and independently powered islands with loads anywhere from 250 kilowatts up to 2 to 3 megawatts, and not entirely served by our utility customers, or by our utility. So they've been forced to implement their own power systems and their own sources. And I think this is what we think at Compass. This is a real benefit what microgrids or mini grids can bring a real benefit to these resort-based or privately held keys. Next slide, please. Yeah, feel free to click all the way through them. So, you know, what does it mean to be an EPC contractor in the Caribbean? You know, we live very close to the ocean, if not on the ocean. We, especially in the Bahamas, have a bunch of different islands, as I've mentioned, and we feel that there's sort of an environmental stewardship that goes along with building these types of systems and providing power to different resorts and clients. Chub Key specifically, you know, they've really been, I believe, a leader in adopting, you know, renewable energy. The diesel emissions or the reduction in diesel fuel consumption is going to be somewhere between the 93 to 95% range as the microgrid comes up and is fully operational. I think another large portion of what it means to be a contractor in the Caribbean is, you know, to transfer knowledge down to the people that we work with. You know, we at Compass, we try and make sure that we do a lot of education, a lot of empowerment to our Bahamian crews that we work with. There's training programs that go through all the way down, be it electrical, mechanical, from a design perspective. So we make sure that we work to pass on the knowledge that we bring to the table and make sure that makes its way into the community. Additionally, obviously, we seek to enlighten our clientele on the benefits of a microgrid, on the benefits of renewable energy, on the benefits of the stability that a battery-based systems brings to their operation. Next slide, please. Just to give you guys a quick overview of what happens at Chub Key. I mean, it's a fishing-based resort. There's obviously a marina and a large hotel component. It supports 105 local Bahamians on the Key. This is the only form of employment on the Key, and you know, this is really the business center, the resort center for the Key. So the island wouldn't really have a lot going on without it. It's located in the Berry Islands, on the western side of the Berry Islands, and they decided that they were going to, when they bid off on doing the microgrid program, they decided it was going to be a 4 megawatt ground-mounted solar system and a 10 megawatt hour lithium-ion battery to support that 95% diesel reduction. Next slide, please. So a little bit about how the project was conceived and you know, maybe how we would see and envision other projects of this nature being developed in the Bahamas and probably the Caribbean as a whole. I think one of the most important things is to understand the desire of the client. There's a lot of ideas that are thrown out there on what can happen and you know, how big this can be and you know, coming totally off diesel and everything else. There's a balance that goes with it. So I think in the design and development program in the first two stages of this slide, it's very important that you have a solid understanding of what the end goal of the client is. And then from a development perspective, you know, who the relevant stakeholders are in your jurisdiction that are going to be required to approve this project. In the Bahamas specifically, there's, you know, obviously there's our utility regulator, IRCA, and then there is the Ministry of Works that was required to get this project executed or approved, let's say. Working in the Caribbean, I think there's a big focus on a very detailed and engineering approach. Later in the slide, I'll get into, or in the presentation, I'll get into the logistics of working in a remote key. In that last slide, everything you saw was what was on the key. There is no chance of finding any parts or pieces or anything else locally. So the engineering and the pre-planning of a project in the Caribbean is of great importance, let's say, as it would be in the more remote locations in Canada if you're up north, or really any other remote location. Next slide, please. Just a little thought. So getting into the hurricane resilience, I know Chris from RMI had previously mentioned, the Bahamas is in a high wind zone. We are prone to hurricane strikes, several times a year if we're not lucky. So this project, we basically cleared and leveled 10 acres of the island in order to put a total of 7,600 solar panels on. The system itself is rated to 185 miles an hour sustained, and we have a gusting rating of 210 miles an hour for the system. Next slide, please. So there you can see the wind rating. So I think we took a lot of inspiration on how to build this from the various publications that have been put out and the lessons learned from Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Dorian, most recently in the Bahamas in 2019. There was a note before on RMI's solar under storm, which I think was really important in paving the way for through bolting racking methods, using stainless steel, higher levels of galvanization, and so on and so forth. Thank you. Next slide, please. The battery systems themselves, we pre-built containers for the battery systems, which are entirely environmentally sealed containers and in and of themselves hurricane rated to the same ratings as well. Each building contains 5 megawatt hours of storage and has a 2 megawatt hour or two 1 megawatt hour bidirectional inverters attached to it. Down in the bottom right, you can sort of get an idea of what the logistics are to move this equipment to the islands. It is, the islands are serviced mostly by ro-ro vessel, and that might arrive once or twice a month. So just going back to that planning and logistics management of running a construction site in the outer islands, it's a very important thing to get right, let's say. Next slide, please. On to the implementation of microgrid controls into an existing system. Obviously, very rarely do you get a developer that's come to you with a bare key and you get to start from scratch. So coordination and uptime management during a construction period is obviously of great importance. The resort makes money by selling rooms and selling hotel slips, and if we continue to bounce their power on and off, that removes some of the confidence that the guests have coming to the resort or plugging in their vessels, and I think there's a lot of time that can be saved by properly planning your implementation into the existing switchgear systems on the island. And in the top right of this slide, you can see sort of what the old looked like, and in the bottom left, or in fact, the bottom two pictures, you can see the updated SCADA and HMI screens from the new system that's been installed. Next slide, please. I've been hinting at them. You can see another picture of where our offloading ramp is for the key itself. Logistics is the number one item that can really throw a project off track from an EPC contractor's perspective. The availability of parts and pieces are only what you plan for, and without those two items, you're not going to have a system integration that will lead to a successful project for your client. Next slide, please. The accomplishment for the Bahamas was that it's the sort of the largest currently operating microgrid in the Bahamas. I'm sure there'll be more, and hope that there will be more coming in the near future. We believe we've helped with the 30 by 30 goal of energy transition, which is 30% by 2030 in the island. It's a resilient system, so we talked about the 185 mile per hour wind rating that the system has achieved, and then from a personal level, the ability to get to a resort and not hear generators running, and no matter how much you hide it, you can hear and see and probably smell some of the pollution coming from them. So being able to turn the diesels off was a milestone for us as well. Next slide, please. Final thoughts on what solar means for the Caribbean, what solar means for the Bahamas, what providing a renewable energy platform. I don't think I can say it better than any of my previous co-presenters on this webinar. It's the way of the future. It is economically beneficial for the client. It is environmentally beneficial as a whole, and properly implemented in a resilient manner is at least something that our group has bought off on. And I think that's it for me.
That was very insightful, Justin. I think a lot of our attendees will get a lot from that. And actually the flow is quite nice, because the next presenter is going to be talking a bit about those containerized buildings. Just David, there is a question in the chat. If you're able to, the first one, if you could address that one. And Chris, there is a question for you as well, because we are 10 minutes over time. So if you guys can address some of the questions in the chat, that'd be great. And I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy Johnson from Modern Huts, and we're going to do a seat change.
Thank you, Anouk, for everything going on today. I would like to start off. My name is Jeremy Johnson. I'm the founder of Modern Huts. We build modular structures using shipping containers. Our core values are for building smaller, smarter homes that are more energy efficient, using sustainable materials, less maintenance, and built in a controlled environment. We have been residential home builders for over 25 years, and we built our first container home in 2008. Next slide, please. Today, I want to talk about the innovations in smart, resilient, and autonomous homes that we at Modern Huts have been working on. The points I will touch on are shipping container benefits, material upcycling, energy management, solar PV, energy storage, home automation, rooftop water collection, gray water recycling, innovative ideas for extreme weather protection, and housing applications for our container homes. Next slide, please. Shipping container benefits. Containers are readily available, extremely strong, durable, stackable, and create a long-lasting structure. They're also transportable, fire resistant, extreme weather resistant, more energy and time efficient as building blocks, and create less construction waste in the process of building prefabricated modular homes than the standard site-built traditional home. We promote environmentally friendly construction with recycled products, including the containers themselves. Our company is addressing the challenge of affordable, energy efficient, healthier, and sustainable housing. We can construct to suit any size or configuration for a project. Building at a facility gives us quality control to finish a project. As well, we can cut the build time by more than 2/3 to develop a home than using conventional methods. Next slide, please. This is just showing transporting to one of our sites. Next slide. It was on the side of a hillside, so it's quite a tricky maneuver. Next slide, please. And then that's placing the project. We can transport our homes most anywhere in the world, and our homes can be placed on almost any terrain in any climate and can be moved multiple times to new locations. We are one of the most weather, fire, flood resistant, and secure housing products on the market. In our homes, we use the highest quality products to suit the needs of the location in which our homes are being sent. Insulation and energy efficiency are our top priorities. Next slide, please. We can stack our homes to decrease environmental impact and to maximize energy efficiency. We can build to be completely off-grid with all our homes, and we have solar as a standard on all our new homes based on budget. Next slide, please. Material upcycling and sustainable products. Containers themselves are a recycled product that were produced for one purpose, and then we repurpose them for our structures. We try to reuse building materials from past projects into each new project, such as flooring, interior doors, walls, and ceiling cladding details. Our green building standards include the use of sustainable building materials like our woods, steel studs, recycled and fire-resistant insulation, low or zero VOC paints, Energy Star appliances, triple pane and impact-resistant windows, and locally sourced woods in select climates. All our building waste is recycled or reused whenever possible. We have reduced our waste by 80% from traditional building methods. Next slide, please. This is just showing a couple of projects that we've done recently. This is a 480 square foot one-bedroom home. Next slide, please. And this shows the interior view of that home. Next slide, please. This is a 420-foot container home garden suite on screw pile foundation. Next slide. And this shows the interior of that home. Next slide, please. This is a 1,280 square foot home. We placed this home in 7 days. The exterior landscaping, roofs, and patio were fully finished within 21 days. So that just shows how fast we can put a project together. Next slide, please. This shows the interior of that home. It's quite open and spacious. Next slide, please. Now I would like to touch on some of the work we've done in the with our smart autonomous modular unit. We worked with Decentralized Energy Canada and 6 of their renewable energy partners to add solar, lithium batteries, energy management system, electric car charging, and full home automation. We worked alongside with SAIT Green Building Department and the National Research Council for some technical assistance and partial funding. This is a 20-foot container with a full home inside that is solar powered, stored in lithium batteries, and run through the energy management system, which controls the loads. The home automation controls the LED lighting, climate control, cameras, motion sensors, security, and entertainment. As well, we have an EV car charger mounted on the outside of the home. We also used recycled or sustainable building materials in the interior finishes. Next slide, please. Rooftop water collection. Because of using steel roofs, rainwater collection is very easy with the right troughs and containment units for collection. Underground containment can be stored for longer periods of time, like from rainy season to dry season. And we're also looking at grade water recycling. This is another area in the home that we're working on to help reduce water use and waste. We use the most up-to-date modern plumbing fixtures, pumps, holding tanks, filters to make this system very efficient and safe. Next slide, please. Since the 90s, there's been a 5-fold increase in storm activity and the strength of those storms. We have come up with a few ideas on how to mitigate the damage caused to homes by these storms. Next slide, please. Starting with floods, we can stack our homes so the lower 2 containers would act as storage, and then the flood water could actually pass through. Another option that we use is doing steel corner piles so that the container home rides up and down and floats on foam-filled metal pontoons. That makes the project move. Wind and storm or hurricane resistant housing. When we cut the steel from the window openings, we reuse this steel. It's framed and mounted with hinges as shutters for the windows and doors, thus recycling all the metal from the construction. There's a 6-pin locking system for the mountings of the storm shutters, as well as all doors and windows have impact resistant glass designed for high wind impact and pressure changes. The frame of the home is the container structure. There are little to no materials that can be ripped off, outside during a storm, or material that can fall or harm the people inside, as the container itself is the whole structure. Studies have been done on wind force on empty containers. A 20-foot container can take up to 150 miles per hour before it's knocked over, and a 40-foot can take up to 130 miles per hour. And this is before the container has been mounted to its screw pile foundation or corner mounting brackets. And we are working with a number of Canadian companies to do testing with our homes and the components in conjunction with testing information by Florida Tech Wind and Hurricane Impact Research Lab. Another part would be fire prone areas. We've also been working on some fire resistant housing with independent fire suppression systems, as well as water mist units on solar power with generator backups. These homes have steel roofs, walls, and steel skirting around them. Insulation in these homes would be done in rock salt, which is a recycled rock wool material that is fire resistant and mold resistant, steel studs, and fire drywall. This is to reduce fire damage to homes, but is not a fireproof option. In earthquake prone areas, we are looking at various mounting options to allow the home to ride with the movement of the quake, thus reducing damage to the home and the safety of the occupants. Next slide, please. Housing applications. We are working towards expanding to global distribution of our homes with centralized manufacturing. Building in the Caribbean will be working with local tradespeople to manufacture the modular units in a central location, then shipped to site and connected to services. Materials and supplies will be shipped from Canada to maintain the highest standards of certified goods in our homes. Next slide, please. Our vision is to work with infrastructure from our many partnerships to build a self-sustaining community for people to work and live safely in. With our multifamily structures with multiple floors, we can finish the project about 60% faster than a site-built structure. Each module arrives fully finished inside and is plugged into the multi-unit structure. This reduces time on site, environmental impact, and faster turnaround time to get clients, tenants, or seniors into their homes. Next slide, please. Our housing is designed to be built on a scalable level for affordable, sustainable, and attainable housing. In island communities and coastal living, we want to offer affordable, resilient, long-lasting, durable homes that are fast to set up and quicker to get people into their homes. These island homes can have rooftop decks, rooftop gardens, green roofs, with cantilevered living spaces. This helps give shade to spaces below and added steel roof structures to reduce heat loads on buildings. The bonus of using containers is our homes are well weather, rodent, and pest resistant. With our product, we also are able to easily expand our living spaces as a family grows by just adding another module. For seniors and healthcare housing, we are aiming at more automation of systems to better care for our clients' patients in a modular built structure which reduces cost and time to build. And with affordable housing closer to home, we are looking for working with various groups in the Indigenous housing and extreme remote temperature problems in the far north. Next slide, please. We also build commercial pop-up structures for bars, concession stands, art, and studio spaces. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we believe that building with shipping containers can be more efficient and environmentally friendly building practice. Modular building methods help increase time and cost efficiencies in building residential homes. We are dedicated to responsible building methods and to the highest safety and environmental standards nationally, while having a strong commitment to our clients and neighborhoods in which we work and live in. We look forward to the opportunity to work together with you to help build a better community. Next slide, please. Thank you very much and have a good day. And here's Anouk again to do our seat swap.
That was fantastic. The flow is very good for this webinar. We're getting some amazing content. Next, we will hand it over to, and you made up some time for us. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Sorry for rushing.
No, it was good. It was good. D-hybrid. Fabian, are you on the line, ready to rock and roll?
I am, yes. Thank you very much. Am I coming through loud and clear?
Perfect.
Great. Thank you very much. So good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everybody, wherever you might be located. Thank you very much for the organization and the wonderful presentations up until now. It's been very interesting. Yeah, my name is Fabian Boretsky. I am responsible for the sales at D-Hybrid Power Systems. And today I want to share with you some insights as a case study for one of our projects in the Caribbean, Mystique Island. Okay, next slide, please. So first, I will just share a little bit of info about D-Hybrid, us as a company. So we have been founded in 2012. The headquarters are in Munich, Germany, but we have partners and offices around the world. And yeah, we like to see us as one of the leading providers for renewable energy concepts and smart grid or microgrid solutions, as Anouk introduced in the early stages of this webinar. What we can do is we provide tailor-made solutions for energy management systems for hybrid applications or microgrid systems together with lithium-ion battery storage. And the goal is similar to what my previous speaker said, to reduce the carbon footprint, to reduce the costs, reduce the dependency of fossil fuel for those applications, and increase the resiliency there. Currently, we have worked or executed over 75 projects in more than 25 countries worldwide, from very beautiful places such as the Caribbean to also some challenging places like, I don't know, Somalia, for example, or Senegal. And are very happy to be presenting here today. Next slide, please. So the core of our business is really the energy management system. It's a customized system where all the sources of a microgrid or of a hybrid system can be connected. That's depicted here in those octagon shapes, where there's, for example, backup diesel generators together with solar PV, together with battery storage and the load, and it might be connected to the grid to support, for example, the local utility, or to protect the client from fluctuating grids or from blackouts or something that might be happening. So there's a seamless transition possible for this kind of with this kind of technology. Next slide, please. Now I want to share a little bit about the initial setup, since I wanted to talk about the case study for this project. So St. Vincent is a private island. Mystique is a private island in the area of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines jurisdiction. Located nicely in the middle of the Caribbean. Obviously, there's no connection to a public grid available, and the consumers have to produce their own electricity, and did that with the help of diesel generators. So that means that there is a high emission of fume or noise also. I think Justin from Compass Power also mentioned that you can try to hide it, but it will be visible at some point. Obviously, there's also high fuel costs associated with it, and we want to help the client to bring down that fuel cost and make them more independent from this kind of fossil fuel. Next slide, please. So what has been special about this project is that we were able to implement the project in phases together with the client. So even if, for example, there's governments or maybe clients don't have the assets, don't have the funding to do a full, let's say 100% renewable project, right? With the technology that we have, the client was able to implement the project in phases. So the first phase was 1.2 megawatt of solar, together with the diesel gensets that are available on the island and our microgrid control system. So with this, they were already able to bring down and save roughly 600,000 liters of diesel fuel per year with this 1.2 megawatt of solar installation. What I want to highlight here is that, as you can see, we try to use the space that is available on the island. So, for example, the housing, back of house, staff housing on the island, and so on, to minimize the impact, let's say, that the solar system makes there, and see how to be integrated as smoothly as possible in the environment that's there. So with this project, or with this first phase of the project, the client was very happy, and then a couple of years later asked us to do the second phase. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there the goal was to increase the share of solar, and also introduce a battery storage system there. And with this new phase, let's say, the client was able to increase again the savings that they had on the fuel to around 800,000 liters of diesel that were able to be saved. What was special about this project is that the desalination plant is also hooked up to the energy management system. So in times of very high solar irradiation or solar production, part of the energy obviously can go to the battery, but the best solar energy is the one that's directly used. So the client or our energy management system is able to use that solar energy that's available, and might be curtailed to produce drinking water for the island, right? And therefore use the solar energy directly. Again, here the goal was to find a space that where the solar could be integrated as much as possible into the landscape, and bother the client or the area as little as possible. Okay, and then next slide, please. There's just a little technical detail here, what I want to show. So with the system, it's possible to have the different locations of the PV plants. Now I just put 2 there, but actually there are several locations on the island that are all located there. And also the energy storage that's there. And also from the diesel generators, they might be located on different in different areas on the island. So this is something that can be realized, and they all are controlled and are working together seamlessly to supply stable and reliable power to the island. And actually, what we see now more and more, because also the colleagues from RMI were talking earlier about that, is we see now more and more projects with grid-connected microgrids, for example, or grid-connected hybrid systems, where a utility company might be interested to build hybrid microgrids, so in subsections of the grid, and connect them to the main, let's say, local or national grid, depending on the size of the nation, right? To have a further resilience. So even if some part of the system might be down, the, let's say, individual islands, individual units, microgrids are still there to serve the client. So this is something that I wanted to chip in here for the discussion. As we are speaking at the moment, we are executing phase 3 of the project, and are supplying and building another battery storage system, or an additional battery storage system for the island to further increase the share of renewables and decrease the use of diesel fuel. Then next slide, please. We have our own battery solution. It can be containerized, can be an outdoor solution, or can be also for indoor installation, depending on what would be required from the client. And yeah, we ourselves are able to select the right components that are there to fit the best suited technology for this project in particular, and to have the best benefit for the client, obviously. Then please, next slide. What are some of the success factors that we see from this kind of project and the other projects that we did? So one is the flexible integration of the complex energy system. So there might be multiple feeders, there might be different gensets of different ages, there might be several generation sites spread out across the area, and the system should be able to integrate those that are available already if they are still usable, and it makes sense to really build one big power system for the client. What's obviously very important is the high frequency and high accuracy measurement of all energy sources. Depending on where you are and how big the grid is, there's no national grid to balance out the fluctuations there. So like Justin said, the most critical part is that to keep the power on always 24/7, irrespective on the conditions that are there. Then the management of all the energy sources for precise microgrid operation, very important. And what has been proven very successful is the manufacturer independent system design, meaning that depending on what comes, I mean, nobody of us knows what will be the next big thing in terms of renewable energy, what kind of inverter technology, what kind of battery technology is there to come. So that the system, the power system, should be able to accommodate innovations that are there on the market and integrate them into the existing system, right? To not have something to not have to replace something in the system. Then the modular system design, to either implement it in stages or be able to expand it over time in a flexible kind of way. And also something that I personally am very interested in is to also integrate other technologies in such hybrid systems. We talk a lot about solar and battery systems, which is obviously a very good and very tested technology. But there might be some applications also in the Caribbean where wind could be integrated, or small hydros or something, or biomass, right, into this kind of system to further benefit and use the resources that are available there on the ground where the client is. Next slide, please. Yeah, and that short and sweet brings me to the end of my presentation. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, or please also post them in the chat later on, and then I will be happy for the Q&A session later on. Thank you very much.
Excellent. My goodness, we could develop a community together. All of the speakers here, we need to come together in one great project.
That would be great. Yes.
Thank you, Fabian. That was very good. And we will move quickly into Brent. So we've picked up some time here. This is our Alberta-owned Iguana Technologies, who have hit the news, global news, in quite a big way recently. So Brent, are you ready to rock?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Well, thanks. Something a little funny on the formatting there. This is the PDF, it looks like. But yeah, Brent Harris. I'm the founder and executive vice president here at Iguana Technologies. We're an equipment manufacturer, so we don't go out and get all these projects done ourselves, but we provide very flexible storage systems that can be useful in island systems. I'll talk a little bit about that here today. If we go to the next slide. Yes, very strange. Anyway, we're focused on power grid modernization. Our core technology is power controls. So power electronics, inverters. I'll go through kind of the structure of an energy storage system a little later on. You'll see some of the same components you've seen in these other projects this morning. We have a product line that covers 3 kilowatt to 15 kilowatt applications, and even larger when they're used together, from smaller residential systems in Europe to 3-phase demand charge management systems. This is all built on a single platform of power electronics, which is really our core technology, and we're currently in the process of expanding that platform to include battery management and deeper battery integration, and have strong partnerships. As Anouk mentioned, we did just get some news out recently that we're partnered with Duracell, who's private labeling our residential product for the North American market. So just getting going on that, but we also are partnered in Europe. So Q-Cells is one of the largest, I think the largest solar panel distributor in Germany, and they've private labeled our product for that market. We're partnered with the Itochu Corporation, which is a large Japanese trading house that's been active in the lithium battery space for decades now, helping build it up from its first origins, and very strong partner in Asia, and as well just on the battery supply side for us as this industry grows and we look for key supply partners on the battery side. In the US, we distribute through CED Green Tech, and Hawaii Energy Connection is a key partner I'll talk a little bit more about today in the Hawaii market as we talk about islands. If we can go to the next slide, 3 there. I won't go through all of this in detail, but just to give a bit of the history, it actually started with our idea for forming the company, which was originally called Sustainable Energy Systems, was to deliver solutions to reduce carbon usage or emissions in microgrids worldwide. We got this power electronics technology to support wind diesel integration at the time, but quickly got pulled into the fuel cell market. Fuel cells, and I heard some mention of hydrogen earlier. That was kind of seen, while batteries were still expensive, this hydrogen and fuel cells was the way we were going to get storage in the electricity system. We had and still have the best fuel cell inverter in the market, but the fuel cell technology itself didn't come into this market. We see it for backup power and forklifts, but not on the grid. So back then we did our first lithium ion battery demonstrations and started working on microgrids, but really moved into the solar PV market as it grew, took our power electronics platform through a few cycles there in niche markets, including the Ontario feed-in tariff program. But in 2012, we started to see the rapid reduction in lithium battery prices and costs. So we shifted into the battery market. And through that, we partnered with leading companies, including LG Chem, Mercedes-Benz Energy. We went through some design cycles, making a product for them. Eventually launched our own product into the market just to prove how a system should be put together, get the technology out there as these markets grew. And that led to our partnership with Q-Cells and eventually with Duracell. We can go to the next slide. So this is, I don't think I'm going to be treading any new ground here, but our goal at Iguana Technologies is to support power grid modernization. The grid is old and antiquated, as people say. Thomas Edison would totally recognize everything that we still use today. There's not been a lot of change. There's, a lot of work on finding new ways to boil water and turn a turbine is really at the center of the power grid still. What is new is solid state, power electronics, distributed controls, fast, reliable networks that are now allowing us to put energy sources right where they're used and have them network and work together and give all the advantages everybody's been talking about today is the modularity, the rapid deployment, the staying up with technology. You don't have to design something now and then 10 years from now when it finally turns on, it's all old technology. You're just every year you're installing the newest stuff and it all works together through networking on the grid, and that's our vision of the future. And we've got a key enabling technology for that. We can go to the next slide. Talk a little bit about how these systems are put together. So here I'm just showing our product line along the bottom. So we have our Evolve product, which is our flagship product for residential markets in the US and Australia. We have 2 flavors of that, 2 different battery chemistries from different suppliers. We've diversified our supply chain on batteries and continue to do so as we see battery shortages continuing over the next many years as the electric vehicle market grows and sucks up all this, so the manufacturing capacity. The third product there, is our Enduro Q-Cells private label product. It's a little bit lower power, indoor rated, designed for the European market. And our Elevate 3-phase product. This was designed for demand charge management in North American markets, but we do see some interest in that platform for smaller microgrid applications as well to form a bedrock for that. The key part of this slide is the three components, and you've seen them on the different project descriptions earlier today. Really, it's the battery itself, which is where the energy is stored, the advanced power controls, that's where the action happens, charging and discharging the battery, maintaining the stability of the grid, meeting all the grid interactive requirements. And then the EMS is the third piece. So the EMS is like the supervisory controller that will decide when and how much to charge and discharge the battery and potentially control loads and other devices in the microgrid or local network. So Iguana's core technology, as I mentioned, is in power controls. We've recently licensed software from our EMS partner in Hawaii, Hawaii Energy Connection and eGear, to bring that in-house and get more direct control over that networking and our customer experience, and then continuing to work through Itochu on diversifying our battery supply chain. Stay current. We can go to the next slide and talk a little bit more about Hawaii. So Hawaii is a very large island grid. We're talking about Oahu here today. Each island in the state of Hawaii runs its own independent grid. There's no interconnection between the islands, and there's no natural gas supply in the islands. There's a little bit of synthetic gas that's used for residential cooking and the tiki lights on the beach and stuff like that, but very little gas locally there. So what you have is a big diesel grid. You can see in the pie chart at the top left, where the vast majority of the electricity is coming from burning oil. There's a coal plant that's responsible for about 11% of the production on the island, which is the coal plant I'll talk a little bit more about today. That is going offline next year. And then you have other varied sources of supply. Rooftop solar on Oahu is widespread. If you took all the rooftop solar and aggregate the power together, it is the largest generator on the island today. You can see on the map here that you're getting to very high levels of penetration. So you'll see in the legend, it's called percent available hosting capacity. So that is what the utilities determined is the maximum remaining capacity to put rooftop solar on a regional basis. You'll see a lot of red there, which means they're saying up to 5%, but basically the utility cannot handle any more solar PV exported onto the grid. So if you want to put solar on your house in those areas, which is most of where everybody lives now, you need to put a battery on the system and put in a zero export controller on it, so that any excess solar during the day is put into your battery. If your battery is full, the solar gets shut down and does not export onto the grid. So that's spreading across the island. That's why they put these programs in and trying to get more individual batteries alongside solar on the island. And effectively today, that's the only way to install solar, is with a battery alongside that's going to control its output onto the grid. What's happening is this coal plant has been slated for retirement for several years, and it will retire next year in September if it doesn't just take itself offline before then, because as you can imagine, the maintenance schedule has been reduced on this plant given that it's getting shut down. There have been several renewable energy projects planned on the island of Oahu, along with a new megawatt scale battery being installed at this coal plant location. We're going to replace that capacity. For a number of reasons, those renewable energy projects have been delayed, but the shutdown of the coal plant has not. And the utilities response was, well, no problem. We've got this battery going in. It's going to go in on schedule. All we're going to do is run our diesels at full capacity during the day. We're going to charge this battery up during the day. And then in the evening, we'll keep the diesels going and discharge the battery, and we'll handle the peak, no problem. The PUC went crazy because we're supposed to be getting off fossil fuels in Hawaii. They've set a 2045 target for no fossil fuels on the island. And the PUC said there's no way we are going to approve the most polluting, the most expensive peaker plant ever installed. anywhere on the planet. So figure it out. The industry came to help. The industry ended up getting access to the planning tools that Hawaii Electric uses. We came up with the program that we look at on the next slide, which is to deploy residential batteries alongside existing solar on the island. So going back to original net metering customers that have had solar for 8 to 10 years now, and want to add more solar, because in the meantime, they've gone out and bought an electric vehicle or added a pool or something. They need more solar to offset their power bill. They're not allowed to without rewriting their net metering contract. So we're providing an opportunity here to say you can add 5 kilowatts to your solar system without redoing your contract, as long as you buy a battery system, which we're going to help you pay for, and run it according to our programs. So we have started installations on this. The program was announced this summer. We've already got hundreds of systems shipped for this program and getting installed every day in Hawaii. And what these systems are doing in the first instance is just running a program. They will charge, as you see in the graphic at the top there, in the middle of the day, fill the battery, and then hold that battery until a specified time in the evening. That's between 5 and 9 p.m. determined by the utility. So it could be from 6:21 to 8:21 p.m. could be your battery schedule, and it will dump all its power in that period. As they bring these on, they're going to schedule them at different times and basically get that peaking profile out of these residential systems. In later, this is a 10-year contract you do with the utility, and in the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see more sophisticated programs come out where these are networked or controlled in real time or compensating for load. But the real goal was just to get capacity out there and run it in a very simple mode that's been proven already, and get that peaking capacity onto the grid. The target is 50 megawatts of this capacity, which is about 10,000 systems, 5 kilowatts per system to be deployed on the island of Hawaii, ideally by next September. That's a pretty tall order when you just look at installation capacity, but it is moving forward. The systems are proving out and getting approved, and it's pretty exciting. I think it's a model that everybody is looking at around the world, because there've been lots of pilots for virtual power plants, but this is the first case I'm aware of where utility reliability is going to be dependent on this virtual power plant. If it doesn't get deployed to the scale that's required, or it doesn't work as specified, people's lights are going to go out on the island of Oahu, starting about this time next year. So it's critical. Everybody's watching it. I'm highly confident in it. And I think it's going to provide a model for capacity expansion and renewable energy expansion for island grids and regular grids around the world. It's going to really de-risk the whole process. That's all I got for today. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the program or battery systems.
Thank you so much, Brent. That's no pressure, hey?
The industry's ready, I think.
Yeah, I think they are. Just on that note, I don't think we have any questions in the Q&A, and David had addressed them, but do you see Iguana? I think everybody's addressed their questions in Q&A, but do you see Iguana ever? I know that the fuel cell industry was not ready at the beginning, but do you see a future role for hydrogen and fuel cells?
I mean, there's the fundamental issue with the fuel cells that we saw was the durability of the stacks. So they couldn't get over 5,000 hours of operation. That works fine for backup power for forklifts, but for the 24/7 combined heat and power application we were looking for is about 8 months. That's not long enough. So they need to get to 40,000 hours. I think the fuel cell technology is being driven by other markets and needs. So yeah, if that happened, that was the issue. The hydrogen itself is not a problem. It's the durability of the asset. And those PEM fuel cell stacks just couldn't last long enough to make the economics work.
And that's probably changing with innovation as time goes on too. So
yeah,
it's
just another storage medium. It's longer term, right? You can You decouple the power from the capacity, kind of like a flow battery. That's what I call it. Their fuel cell electrolyzer is an organic flow battery. Basically the same thing. So yeah, you can get long duration or high capacity storage at pretty low cost, as long as you can get that stack to last as long as it needs to.
Right. And David, I wanted to go back to Derek's question about natural gas and biogas. It made me actually wonder whether renewable natural gas might be something of interest in the future with, you know, the use of biomass residues to produce a renewable natural gas. Is there anything happening in that space, David or Chris?
Not a whole lot. It's a discussion that does take place on the sidelines, and there are usually proposals that come through, you know, often throughout the islands on those. The challenge, and Chris can probably speak to this better, the challenge is that it's usually not through the use of a local renewable resource.
Oh,
That's the overall challenge. Chris?
oh, I think you're still on.
Yeah, sorry. I'm looking at Bonaire real quick. Bonaire does something in that regard. But we didn't help them do it. Yeah,
It's
let me
just-
get back. Let me get back to you on that.
Yeah, it's just an interesting concept to think, because if you've got biomass residues, waste, food waste, something like that, is there something we can do, you know, with that resource on a small scale?
Yeah.
And of course, that kind of links a little bit with the hydrogen question too. You can produce hydrogen from water using electrolyzers. So that's maybe some longer term complicated infrastructure stuff, but it definitely looks like solar-based microgrids are the easiest and most affordable things to adopt right now, right?
Yeah, and let me put it in context. So in Anguilla, for example, biomass was discussed for a very long time. Actually, we had done a memorandum of understanding, PPA actually, to produce from biomass. That whenever we get into the unfamiliar type of sources or resources, it gets a little trickier to I guess win over the public or the governments or whatever. It takes a little more effort to bring it to the finish line. So in Anguilla, you know, although it wasn't quite incineration, the discussion came up about incineration and what impact that would have on the health of people downwind and the usual discussions that come. You know, similarly, wind is viable in the Caribbean region. You have to build in some more resiliency, so it still has some room to grow in terms of the technology, but it's viable. But you have to get over the resiliency hurdle and the sort of not in my backyard type of discussion. So it's just that solar is more plug and play, easier. People are familiar with it, and that's why it has a little more traction. But all these discussions are happening.
Yeah. And did any speakers, like Justin, did you?
Can I add something to that, Anouk?
Yeah.
Just on solar, I think that something people don't realize is the uniformity of the resource, right? When you look at wind maps, where should I put my wind turbine to get it? You know, 100 meters makes a huge difference, where anybody, you know, on any island or even in the city of Calgary, you're within 10% of each other, any location. It's very easy to plan. You know, it's modular and solid state. You put it out there and you get the predicted performance out of it. Any of these other supplies there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get confidence in how much electricity you're going to get.
Quality and consistency.
I was going to say, there was a question earlier around, you know, tidal and geothermal, you know, all those things that could definitely make sense in the future, but they're so site specific and there's so much de-risking and money that has to go involved, get involved. For instance, St. Vincent spent better part of 6 years and many tens of millions of other people's grant money to put 3 drilling wells in, 3 holes in the ground. And although they found steam, they didn't find the quantity or the quality of steam enable, you know, that was going to get the 10 megawatt plant that they needed. So To Brent's point, I mean, it's so site specific and there's just so much risk involved. That solar just is fairly ubiquitous. Just base it south in the Northern Hemisphere, you know.
Do you have any pumped storage applications in the Caribbean, like looking at water kind of reservoirs, using renewable energy to pump water up to a top reservoir on a small scale?
Canary Islands that do that over, you know, near Portugal or Morocco. Yeah, so they were early pioneers in that, but none in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
All the storage in the Caribbean. I think Aruba has a flywheel associated with an early wind farm, about 26 megawatt wind farm, and the rest of the storage applications are lithium ion.
Okay. Okay. And Justin and Myrna, Justin, you'd made a comment at the end of Myrna's presentation. I was wondering if any of the presenters or panelists have questions for each other, and we've got a couple minutes left. If
I guess my comment towards Myrna's presentation is it was very thought provoking. It's not something that we see or have access to in the, you know, operating out of the islands all that often. So it was, yeah, I guess thought provoking was my initial concept and reflection on that.
I feel like I should start my presentations always with the Monty Python reference, you know, and now for something completely different. But yeah, we're really, I'm just soaking in all of these other presentations, because what I get to do is I get to model your technologies. So, and oftentimes we're asked, you know, unbeknownst to certain suppliers, you know, if we can model the types of technologies that you all are bringing to market. And that is a huge part of that de-risking, especially when it comes to some really innovative ideas like we're talking about, you know, here is not only how we can model, you know, what the efficiency savings are and what the best practices are and what it's really easy to do and implement, but also model, you know, things that are under consideration that may or may not be have some really specific advantages. So yeah, all the rest of you and your presentations too. So.
Now that sounds like a good Canada Caribbean project to partner on. Some of these things that can't be, you know, that capacity building, RMI has been doing capacity building for quite some time and is very good at it. But there are some of these bleeding edge or emerging sides of things that would probably benefit from this type of modeling for increased de-risking and just testing things out. I think that'd be quite exciting. Well, I think, is there anybody, wait a minute, there's a Brent Harris. Will the grid on Hawaii allow for bigger unit like Elevate, or is it strictly Evolve? Someone who knows your product.
Yeah, the grid allows the Elevate there. It's a question of the economics. So most of the solar going in, almost everywhere, the distributed solar is going in on a residential level. There is a market for commercial solar, and that's where the Elevate would go. It's a 3-phase product. Most residential homes don't have a 3-phase interconnection, so but for that it doesn't work there, but it certainly works other places in Hawaii. And if a commercial building has solar, they are also able to participate in this program, and that would use an Elevate or similar product.
Excellent. Well, we are at 12. So fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful presentations.